Today. Well, first of all, thank you for coming. I guess the first word have to go to our marvelous sponsors because I don't organize yet conferences, but I know without their support, none of this would be possible. So my first word of thanks goes to them. Of course, the other word goes for the Bosnia Agile team who set up this amazing conference. I've worked already in the past in Dubai. I had the experience, the privilege to be there, and it was quite an amazing effort. So far today is going very, very well. So I also would like to thank them for being here and having me here. So today I'm just in 1 minute just going to say who am I, just to give you a quick update. So I'm currently working in the European Commission as a freelance consultant. I've been there for almost 7 years. And most of the work that I do is help them with their Agile journey. The Commission is like a big international, multinational company. Then you have several DGs, which is like the national branches. So all of them are talking about thousands and thousands of people and teams. So the idea is that we go and help those teams in their Agile journey. Either there's just simple teams developing and delivering a simple product, or about scaling like hundreds of people working in a scale environment. So that's more or less what I'm currently doing. I've been doing Agile around 20 years, and today actually I'm going to share with you some of my experiences, but I would like to hear some of your inputs because that's why we're also here. In my free time, I like to play drums. I play drums since I was 14 or 15. I like that much. My neighbors not so much. Piano I've learned to play a couple of years ago with my daughter. I don't know how to play, but she actually asked me to. I'm a big fan of working out, keeping in shape, and of course, yeah, I'm not saying I know how to cook because I don't. I really like to eat, and since Thursday night when I got here, oh my God, my blood pressure probably went up. It's such an amazing food. I always believe that culture is also about food. And so far, I'm loving it.
But first tell us, what did you eat?
Well, listen, several types of meat, several types of vegetables, several types of cheeses, several types of the prosciutto and the ham, and then of course sweets. I guess I tried everything. It's just been really, really amazing. So very welcome, very warm people so far. I've been finding here, outside, so quite an experience. Okay. Here are my directions. I'm going to be here until the end of the day. I'll stay in the hotel tomorrow. I'll be here. So if you need any questions, just drop me a line. Go and see me outside. I'll be happy to discuss any topic. There's my directions. You can find me on LinkedIn just with typing my name. This is my email, my phone number. Whatever you need, just drop me a line or a message. Okay.
So sorry to take the thunder from your speech.
Okay, go ahead.
I have important announcements. We had, as you know, workshop cancellation, but we had Eric Bugler and Angel Diaz offer that we actually host the Open Agile Q&A session. So that session is already updated on the agenda, and 75 minutes will be used for any topic, Agile topics you have, any questions that you have. If you're a coach, that's a great chance to actually ask the question. If you are working on information or anything like that, you have 2 experts to use for 75 minutes. So enjoy the rest of the session.
So, without further delay, let's dive into what brought us here, which is getting to delivering powerful review meetings. So first of all, how many Scrum Masters, Product Owners, developers do I have here? All of them. Okay, so I guess more or less you are coming to the right place. So the reason why I'm presenting this topic is about to share with you the experience that I've been collecting for at least 10 or 12 years. Okay. So I'm not going to say how you should do it. I'm not going to say this is the best way to do it. Far from that. You'll see this has been a learning journey. So I'm going to share with you some of my experience, but I would like also to hear, and I'm going to ask you some questions about how you actually do things. What are your key main points? Your key main pain points. Exactly. Okay. So, one of the first questions I would like to ask you, from you, how many of you actually do a preparation for a sprint review? A formal preparation? Yes, so you came to the right place, very likely. Okay. So for me, I've always learned, I've been learning and more for the last few years, there's always the need to have a preparation. Okay, so I don't go, and my team, they don't go to a sprint review without knowing exactly what they're going to do. And that requires a little bit more than just focusing on a demo. Okay? So when I talk about preparation, we're talking about making sure that we have our structure in terms of sprint review properly assembled. Okay? So how many of you have you thought about the structure, the possible structure of a sprint review? Is it essentially about the demo that you have, or are you taking into account other factors? Is it all about the demo, or is there anything else that you do during the sprint review? I know it's lunchtime, yes, I know we still shake a bit, but...
What went well, what went wrong,
Okay, that's more retrospective, but still you have some room for that in the sprint review, what I call the wrap-up. But do you have a brief phase where you, for instance, you set the ground, you set a common ground, align expectations or something? Okay, well, that's why you're here. Good. Okay, so for me, one of the things that I've learned, I like to make it very clear that we have 3 steps in our sprint review, okay? We'll go through each one of them, but essentially the first one is to align expectations, make sure that everyone knows what we're talking about, okay, what we're going to see. Then, of course, we have the demo, and then we have a wrap-up and backlog review. Okay, so this is how I usually split the organics of a sprint review. Okay. Now let's see briefly, because then I'm going to show you the real setup of the sprint review. So what is actually aligning expectations? So usually what we do is prepare a 5 to 10 minutes PowerPoint presentation to set up the context, to align expectations. For instance, who has kids here? I do. Small kids. Do they like fish?
Yes.
Yeah, there you go. So probably you are familiarized with this scenario that when you go to bed, when you go to have dinner and they come and they ask you, what's for dinner? Fish. I mean, the atmosphere doesn't go that well. Okay, screaming, I don't want to eat, etc., etc. Of course, the atmosphere gets ruined. Okay. So what I started doing a few years ago is, before we start cooking, I know that it might also be due to my lack of skills of cooking that my daughter complains. That's fine. But what I do now is 1 hour, 1 hour and a half before dinner, I tell her immediately, we're going to have fish for dinner. So she screams, etc. There's all the scenes there, but it's dead. So we align expectations. So by the time we're going to go for dinner, she already knows what she's going to eat. So she doesn't give all her fury during that moment, but the expectations are aligned. So the idea of doing this when we start the review is precisely to make sure that everyone knows what they're going to see and what they're not going to see. Okay? Secondly, this is still part of the preparation, we make sure that we have agreed, the team, product owner, everyone, we know what items do we actually want to bring. Because don't forget, in the sprint review, I might have another set of stakeholders who actually have never seen the product. Okay? But in advance, I want to make sure that at least the team and the product owner, they agree, they know exactly what I'm going to be talking about. Okay? That puts a lot of focus. And the team, for instance, they create a specific rule that will say, until that day, that's our deadline to have stuff in our sprint review. After that, that's it. We're not going to introduce anything else. Okay? I've seen teams 10, 20, 30 minutes before the sprint review still compiling code to see if they can put it inside. Okay? So this is about defining those rules until where you want to go to make sure that everyone knows what you're going to present. Okay? And the next step is about aligning with the product owner two key essential points that we're going to see also ahead. The first one is about who will present the demo. Okay? So I don't know how many of you actually encourage the product owners to actually do the demo. How many of you do this? Voila. So there's nothing wrong about it, all right. It's an option, it has its pros and its cons, okay? But it's an option. But the most important here is that you will agree with your product owner who will be doing the demo, okay, in advance. This needs to be very, very clearly stated, okay? The other part is, and we'll see why, is who will define the test cases, or whatever you want to call it, that you're going to present in the sprint review. Okay? Because in the sprint review, you're doing a demo, so you're better doing a demo with, with a guideline, with the route. Okay? So what you need to understand is, and there's nothing wrong about it, either you use, your product owner requests your test cases that the team has delivered and has built to test their increment, or they say, well, we have our own. Okay? Nothing wrong about each one of these options. They have different requirements. We'll see which ones. But this also needs to be very, very clear. Okay? So, in a wrap-up, what we have in terms of preparation, we create our whatever presentation, doesn't matter, which is to set the expectations alignment. We make sure that we know which items are we comfortable to demonstrate. And the last one, we have agreed with your product owner who's going to do the demo and which test cases are we going to use. Okay? Anyone usually prepares, does this kind of preparation or something similar?
Similar.
Okay, good. And how does it work usually? Do you have any difficulties, or is it the team sees it normally, product owners they agree, how it usually works?
So, generally, like you described, but in some cases we have some leads or some other guys that are doing demos as well.
Okay.
They're leading demos.
Okay, good. Thanks. So, we have set up, we have prepared our sprint review, and now, of course, the sprint review. So, like I mentioned, the first step that we have is, of course, to align and review the expectations. So, this initial presentation that can be given either by your Scrum Master or by one team member, doesn't matter, okay? And I usually focus on 5 or 6 items. First, the scope, so to make sure that it's clearly aligned what was the iteration goal, what was the sprint goal, and what are the stories or any backlog items that you have that were supposed to comply with that goal. Okay, so we make this very clear, because don't forget, you might have stakeholders that have never been directly involved in the setup of the iteration goal, or they're not involved, for instance, directly in the interactions that you have with your product owner, so they might not be aware exactly what's going to be there. Some of them might be the first time that they're going to see whatever part of the product that you are demonstrating, so this is quite important. Okay, so the next step is to tell them, okay, from this scope, this is what we have achieved. Okay, these are the stories that you are going to see that we're going to demonstrate. These are the items that we did not achieve. Okay, some of them might complain, but that's why we have this alignment of expectations. Some discussions might arise why we were not able to do that, etc. We'll see that we have a small part at the end to identify that. New or dropped items, so we make sure that maybe during the iteration there were some items that were added or dropped from the backlog. I'm not saying that they were interfering in the sprint, but some changes might have occurred, so you want to make sure that you make that very clear. And finally, I describe some difficulties, impediments, and risks. The idea is not to debate strategies, how to mitigate, and all those risks. It's not the time and place to do that. Just identify them, make sure that they understand, and of course, after the sprint review, or even during the wrap-up, as you'll see, we can then discuss about them. This is just an alignment of expectations. Okay? Finally, I didn't include here, but if you want, because sometimes it doesn't bring much value, but it's up to you. Sometimes you might show a velocity chart to show the progress of the team. You might show your updated release plan, a burn-up chart for the forecast of the release. I mean, it's up to you to see if it brings any added value. Does anyone does that? Any other part of the sprint review, do you show this kind of information?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, you get benefit from it, you get nice feedback, or sometimes you say,
Yeah, we want to be transparent, so we want to know where we are, where we stand, what we did so far, and expectation going forward. So in each sprint, actually, it's actually sprint review, we actually check where we are.
okay,
And team loves it. So.
okay, good, thank you. Anyone else would like to share? Okay, let's continue. So, So after setting up and aligning the expectations, of course, the next step is the demo itself. So let's go to the second floor. So the demo, essentially, that's where you're going to show how we have implemented, how we actually achieved the sprint goal that we have committed, meaning these are the items that we said that we have achieved in our alignment of expectations, okay? So, 3 topics, 3 points that I would like to discuss with you, because I also want to hear your experience on these. The first one is single points or hands-on demo. So either you have one person guiding the demo, so there's only one person playing with the application and then displaying the projector like this and everyone is seeing, or you have someone guiding, meaning doing the demo, but all the people, all the other stakeholders and product owner, they are also doing the same with their laptops, okay? Have you guys tried different approaches, or you usually go more for one and more for the other? More for single points?
First,
Okay. Most of the time because it's hard to get the hands-on, right? You don't have enough laptops and computers to do that.
Yeah.
It's not practical. I mean, we send them credentials so they can do it afterwards.
Okay.
So,
Okay, okay. That brings me to my next question. Do you have a product owner or another team member doing the demo? And usually, my decision on this, it also depends on that. So, for instance, if I have a single point demo, my experience has shown me that having the product owner doing that demo, I can embrace and I can engage more effectively the other stakeholders that are present, okay? Because they connect more to the product owner, so they feel more comfortable when they see one of them actually doing the demo, okay? But on the other hand, if you have a hands-on demo, so all of them are actually going to work, what I usually tend to select is to have one team member conducting the demo, and the product owner actually goes around the other stakeholders to actually help them following the process, following the test cases, okay? But like I said, this is my experience. It doesn't mean that you can't try other scenarios. There are multiple combinations. I don't know if you have different experiences with this, but I would like to hear them, okay? Finally, which test cases to use? So here is about, are you going to use your test cases that the team has created? Or are you going to use the test cases that your product owner and stakeholder might have created? All scenarios are possible. If you decide to use, and we'll see that, to use the product owners and the stakeholder scenarios, you might want to get a look at them before the sprint review. And why is that? Because sometimes those test scenarios are not by far, connected to the acceptance criteria that you have for your items. So you define acceptance criteria for items that you have implemented, and your test scenarios, they should be created to actually validate that acceptance criteria. This is nothing new for any of you. But sometimes what we have is, our business, they actually don't pay much attention to that, and you ended up doing test scenarios that are far from being relevant from the acceptance criteria that you want to verify, okay? So there's nothing wrong using one or the other. Just make sure that if you're using the ones that you have from your business, make sure that they are relevant, okay? So the next step, of course, you start demoing, okay? So for every item that you have in the backlog, essentially you state the name, you obviously make a small description, and then you start doing the demo, okay? And how does this demo works? I guess this is not going to be nothing new for you, I guess, but very important, I always tend to make sure that we try to validate our items, building the test scenarios that are clearly focused on validating the acceptance criteria. So what does that mean? Every time we have a sprint review and we are validating an item, we identify what acceptance criteria are we verifying, and which are the test scenarios that we are using to verify that. So every time they are testing something, they know exactly the context where they are. So they know that this test scenario is to actually verify this acceptance criteria from this story that we are checking, okay? So we continue doing this until we're going to find that our test scenarios either were able to validate our acceptance criteria, okay? And this is how and my experience has shown me this is probably the most important element, is to make sure that your business has a proper context of what they are doing. They need to know that, why am I testing it this way? Why am I doing this scenario? Why am I testing if I have the right numbers of a credit card? Who spoke about credit card and the acceptance criteria? No one. So we need to make sure that this is fully aligned, okay? So with that, and this is another topic that I find usually quite interesting, is when we do this, I don't know if it's your case, but I would like to hear your experience. A lot of times, I don't see the teams asking for the confirmation of, is it done? Can we accept this? So we do a demo, the business, stakeholders, product owner, yeah, this is working okay, but we actually don't go and honestly and directly ask them, can we accept this? And I had in London in 2018, there was a great talk by Pia Young on rejection. And it sounded so familiar to me because I don't know if it's your experience, but in my case I see a lot of teams, because they are afraid of rejection, they are afraid of hearing a no, they tend not to ask for the confirmation. Can you accept this? Can you say this is accepted? It's done. And I see a lot of teams not doing that. What's your experience with that? Do you go effective and say, okay, now I saw this, can we accept this? Is it okay? Can we say, done, and go to the next item? Do you do this?
We don't do it, we do it eventually, we don't do it in demos. The reason being is, okay, we tested on our user cases,
Yeah.
and they didn't test it on theirs. So our users, they want to test it as well, the people that we did the demo to. So what we did, we have the next stage. So first stage is we demo them, and then we show them everything, and it works perfectly, of course, because we know what we need to click. And when they test it and come back to us, okay, this is done, this works, or maybe this doesn't, it's still not signed off. So it needs to be properly tested. So while they're testing it, on the other hand, we are going into different sprints and then coming back to it. So it's not signed off on the
Okay.
demo.
Great. Yes.
Also, there is a situation where you have different outcome than what the expected benefit was. Maybe the benefit itself wasn't fully to what the client wanted. So we're always looking to improve what we already had. There is no play game there.
Of course. So you might even come to the conclusion that although you actually delivered what was the initial acceptance criteria, they actually realized that, okay, now the acceptance criteria is different. Perfectly fine. But coming back to your question, have you asked them? And I'm just asking because I actually went through the same in different situations. And what I was always trying to solve is what makes them uncomfortable that they can't actually do the testing in the session. Maybe if it's because they don't have the means, that's a different story. But usually I was trying to understand what prevents you to actually come here and play with this and tell me it's okay. Okay. So
What would you suggest for the remote stakeholders? In most cases, we have to do it via call. So stakeholders that we are presenting to are not present physically.
And that is true.
yeah, what I did several times was using WebEx. So we actually have a live demo. They are testing it in the exact same way that we did. Actually, one of the flag projects in the European Commission, Wi-Fi for You, where the idea is to deliver vouchers to the communities where they can actually install free Wi-Fi, etc. The demos that we had were all of them, and even the stand-ups, etc., but the demos were all with distributed stakeholders. And the principle was the same. Okay? Some of them were, that's why I was asking, were not comfortable to give their yes there. And I couldn't have the opportunity to meet all of them because there were many, but I could clearly see that some of them were not comfortable because they were not spending enough time with the system, because they had the system available every time so that they could play with it. But we are always, because they had all the means, they had all the test scenarios to actually test them. So it was not due to the lack of means that they could actually do the test and they could actually say, it's okay. Okay, but I understand what you're saying. And sometimes if they can't actually do the testing, of course it's more complicated to actually get their immediate acceptance. But also that we make very, very clear, just because they are accepting him, sometimes, this is what I feel, sometimes they are afraid that just because you're saying yes, you will never go back and review that item. And sometimes they have these feelings, so that's why they don't feel comfortable. Once again, my personal experience, if you have others, I would like to hear, okay? So anyway, this is another very important topic that I tend to put a lot of focus. Ask for the acceptance. If they don't accept, try to understand why, okay? Try to give them all the conditions that they can clearly see what they are testing, what's the acceptance criteria, and if everything goes well, yes?
Why do you stress on acceptance instead of just focusing on feedback, which would be more general?
The feedback goes, and that was the case presented when, oh yes. So here was about, when I talk about the acceptance, is I want to get feedback precisely that what we did was correct. But that doesn't prevent them to say, yes, that's nice, but actually that we saw, this is not exactly what we want. We want something else. That's exactly what we're going to see also in the wrap-up. That might happen. That might happen. And then we need to incorporate that. Here what I'm talking is...
You press the wrong button.
Okay, there we go. Here my concern is indeed actually to get real feedback, but I want to get sure that they know exactly what they are evaluating. Okay, so accepting means that they know exactly that we did what they were asking, but that doesn't mean that I cannot get other options and get changes in the acceptance criteria precisely based on that feedback. Great question. But that's exactly the point. Yes.
Actually, what I was trying to say that we are doing that a bit different. We want all these items to be accepted before the demo. So we are using the demo just to get, like you said, just to get some feedback. We don't want to show them incomplete items or items that are not yet accepted.
Yes.
So that's how we are doing it. And we have a really short time, just an hour, and it is not feasible to have all these items went through and accepted on the demo.
I'll come back to that at the end, but that's what I call informal feedback. It's a practice that I encourage all teams. As soon as they have one item completing during the sprint, put it there available. Product owner, take a look. If we do this constantly, by the time they go to the sprint review, it's much smoother because they already know what they're going to see. Excellent topic. We'll come back to that after. Okay. So after this, essentially is about is it done or not? And once again, if you get feedback saying, well, yeah, this is nice, but actually the acceptance criteria needs to change because now we have realized that now we realize how it works. Actually, we don't want it this way, we want it a slightly different way. You incorporate that feedback, and of course, you cannot say it's done. Okay? Next. So, as you can imagine, while you're iterating and getting several items, you're going to collect different types of feedbacks. Items that were accepted, items that were not accepted, items that have new feedback, acceptance criteria that has changed, etc., etc. So this is what I call the wrap-up and backlog review, because one of the goals also, at least that I try to get, is also my backlog properly prepared and including exactly the feedback to make sure that next time I go to a planning, my iteration planning, I already know and I already have incorporated the feedback from this session. Okay? So one of the important things I always recommend is, okay, now that the demo is done, let's go through the items again and see what was the current status. So what was the output of it? So you start and say, what are the items that were accepted, that the business said, it's okay as it is, we accept it. Once again, it's very important to make sure that just because they are saying yes, it doesn't mean if there's a bug or if they change their minds, you're not going to go there. Okay, this needs to be very clear. But for instance, if it's not okay, you need to clearly understand why. Okay, either because your stuff bug came out, whatever, or if it's not according to the new acceptance criteria based on new feedback, that needs to be very, very clear. And you have to say it in front of everyone, this is why it's not accepted. Okay, you need to all agree with that. Okay, there you go. Even being a change in initial idea, it should be implemented. That's exactly what was being said. Feedback needs to be incorporated. It doesn't matter if the initial idea, if you implemented the right idea initially, you have the feedback, it tells you, yeah, but it brings more value in a different way. Then it needs to go like that. okay? So, we now reviewed the items. So what we want to understand is, what is now the feedback of that review? What's the impact on that backlog? Because items might have been accepted, others might not have been accepted. New items might pop up based on the new feedback. So you need to make sure that your backlog will reflect that, okay? Items that were not done, items that are new or maybe dropped. This is what you need to make sure that you get everything properly stated, everything up to date, so that your backlog will actually reflect this new view. Why? Because the next time I want to have my iteration planning, I want to make sure that this is properly structured, properly organized, because that's how we start our iterations planning, with a properly grouped backlog, okay? So, here, once again, very, very important, make sure that your business understands, and this, my experience is very important, they understand that just because you're saying that they accept it, it doesn't mean that it cannot be changed, okay? Very, very, very important topic. So, what we do is, because we already have there all the key relevant stakeholders, as a team, we will do a quick grooming, okay? So if new items came in, okay, if you have time in the sprint review, okay, it doesn't mean that you cannot do after, but the point is make sure that your backlog reflects all the current priorities, and of course, for your product owner and stakeholders to be able to prioritize, they also would like to know how big it is, okay? Because if I have two things that deliver more or less value, you probably want to do the thing that will cost less in terms of effort, okay? So if I do one thing in one fraction of the time that brings the same value, I want to do this first, okay? So here, if you have time during the sprint review, because you have everyone there, get your team to actually provide those relative estimates, okay? So that they know how it would be placed in terms of the backlog. With that information, the stakeholders should be able to prioritize the backlog, okay? And like I said, because you have everyone there, all the product owner, business, whatever, if you have questions, they are there for you to ask, okay? With this, you should be able to prioritize your backlog. And that's what you get. At the end, because that's one of the key goals at the end of the sprint review, is to have a backlog that reflects the feedback of your product owner and the stakeholders. That feedback might be new items, the items that were completed, items that might have been dropped, new items that might be added. You want to make sure that they reflect their priority. Okay? This is what we want to achieve by the end of your sprint review, because that's why you're there, to collect the feedback, incorporate that feedback, and make sure that you adapt. Okay? So the feedback that you're getting is the third step of the entire loop, because then you probably have to adjust. Okay? So the goal is make sure that your backlog reflects precisely all those priorities, because with that you'll be able to start your sprint planning with a clean and groomed backlog. Okay? So, in a nutshell, sprint reviews, 3 steps. The alignment of expectations, the alignment of expectations, we have the demo, and then we have the wrap-up, okay? Make sure that when you do a sprint review, you take a little bit of time to prepare it. The presentation, whatever PowerPoint, whatever mean you want to use, just make sure that 5 or 6 minutes to set up the expectations. During the demo, make sure that you make very clear what items are they going to be tested. In each one, make sure that your business understands what they are seeing and why they are doing those test scenarios, what acceptance criteria are they mapping, and how do they actually position themselves inside of each item. Use that to collect any feedback, okay? New items, items that are accepted, items that are not accepted, items that are dropped. Make sure that if necessary, because you have your team there, you have your product stakeholders, etc., make sure that you estimate whatever needs to be estimated, that you groom whatever needs to be groomed in your backlog, so that you can use your product owner and your stakeholders to properly prioritize it. Because at the end, that's what you want to take from your sprint review. You want to have collected the feedback, you want to have learned, and make sure that the product backlog reflects all that knowledge that you get already from that sprint review. With that, you should be able to start your next iteration and your planning cycle. And I guess that's it. Thank you very much. We still have plenty of time for questions. Let me see.
Oh, well, I think everybody can hear.
Okay, and I'm just worried about the recording, because sometimes.
Okay, I can maybe speak up a little bit.
Okay.
In your opinion and experience, if some item results in rejection, what was the main cause for that? Was that like a mistake of interpreting requirements, or setting up the requirements in the first place, or what?
I mean, I have many different reasons, but regarding the interpretation, a lot of times it comes from bad backlog grooming. Okay, either the business, the product owner, does not know one part that he needs to do with the stakeholders, because grooming is not just you and the team. It's actually the product owner with the stakeholders, making sure that they reflect what other items they need to be in the backlog. That's one step. The next step, then product owner goes to the team and say, listen, these are the news that we have to you. What is the impact on this in terms of backlog, sizing, etc. And then with that, product owner can go back to the stakeholders and say, okay, this is what they told us how big it is, how are we going to prioritize it? Of course you can do this in one session. But in terms of misinterpretation, most of the time is not that the team misunderstood, it's actually the mechanics of the grooming require some improvement. I mean, that's my experience. Thank you. More questions?
So maybe just a comment, sorry, I turned my back on you. But in regards on not being aligned with the expectation, because often we tend to show what has been done just at the end of the implementation. Rather include the person, the stakeholder, whoever needs to review what has been done throughout the process. Because I face often that when I explain something to a client, he understands, but when he actually sees it, he tells me, oh, actually, this is not what I imagined. So it's very important for people to see, to visualize what you are trying to deliver.
Perfect.
So include it.
That was exactly the question that was raised. Sorry, your name?
I'm Leila.
Leila. Exactly, and that's what I was saying, I call informal feedback. It's 150% agree. So as soon as the team has something that can be shown, even when they are delivering, if the product owner can already see, it will be, or edit stakeholders, whatever, but especially if you're working with a product owner that's aligned and empowered and business savvy, usually is enough. So he's there, he already knows it. So by the time you go to actually your sprint review, he's already familiarized. So it's almost like a formality, like I said, because that informal feedback, essentially what you're doing, you're actually reducing the feedback to something almost like daily or every 2 days, which is what we want, very, very small feedback groups. That's exactly top notch. You nailed it, one of the most important things. Perfect. Any more questions?
Just one comment
Yeah.
related to this. To avoid any mismatch between what the client expects and what you deliver or plan to do some mock-ups, wireframes, draw it on the board, on piece of paper if you don't have any wireframing. It will save you from relentless going back and forth and that kind of stuff. Really, one picture is worth 1,000 words, always, really others.
Probably heard about
Even if it's ugly, it doesn't matter, just to get the concept of it.
Lean UX. Lean UX is now all about not leaving the design and etc. just in the hand of one person, but actually bringing that development cycle much earlier. And that's whether it's mock-up, real prototypes, it doesn't matter. Just make sure that you start showing them something. Great question. Thank you. Any more? Well, if not, once again, thank you very much for your time.